Hey, Raymond here from the Beginner Photography Podcast, and even though I thought they were cute at the time, when I look back at my kids' baby photos, well...
Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast with Raymond Hatfield, the podcast dedicated to interviewing world-class photographers to ask them the questions you want answered. Whether you want to be the world's best wedding photographer, family photographer, pet photographer, or you just want to take better photos of your kids growing up, we will get you to start taking better photos today. Here with you as always, husband, father, home brewer, LA Dodgers fan, and award-winning Indianapolis wedding photographer, Raymond Hatfield.
Hey, thank you so much for joining me today. I am Raymond, your host of the Beginner Photography Podcast. I'm really excited for today's interview. It's something new that I hope that you will enjoy. We'll see. So, first, a little piece of business. Guess what? It is now February 2018, which means it is time for a new monthly photo theme challenge in the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group. Last month, we had a huge success. So many members uploaded photos of what they perceived to be a fresh start, and I just did a Facebook Live on Friday with a live critique that I think some people got some thorough enjoyment out of and learned a thing or two. So we're going to do the same thing again here in February and every other month here in 2018. So February's theme is going to be, are you ready? Passion. See what I did there with it's like Valentine's Day for passion, but also photography is a passion for a lot of people. So I don't know. I thought it sounded smarter in my head, but now when I say it out loud, it just seems very, like a cheap. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I'm really excited for this challenge because I have partnered with Timba, the camera bag manufacturer. They make great camera bags, very high quality, and they have such a wide range of different types of camera bags, from inserts that you can put into a bag that you already have, like women have purses. Maybe you have an old purse that you love, but you just don't use it for your everyday stuff now. Well, now you can repurpose that by putting a Timba insert into your old purse, use it as a camera bag. Or they have actual full-on camera bags, from messenger bags to traveling bags. And this month, this is exciting, I'm giving away a bag. I am giving away a Timba bag. This is super cool. Let me grab it. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm super excited about this thing. This is the Timba Solstice 20-liter bag, and this is made for traveling. This is a backpack. It's really well built. In fact, I'm going to be doing a full review, posting a blog and YouTube video about it sometime this month, and at the end of the month, I'm going to be giving it away to one of you beautiful listeners. So, if you are not in the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group and you want to win the bag, you got to join the group, and then you got to participate in the monthly photo contest. Pretty easy, pretty simple. So head over to facebook.com/Beginner Photography Podcast, and you will see a link to join the group on the right side of the page. Yeah, right side of the page. Click it. You got to answer 2 questions. I got to make sure that you're a human and that you're not trying to sell me like some weird stuff, like I don't know, HGH pills or sunglasses to everybody in the group. And I also want to know why it is that you want to advance your photography knowledge. So that's it for today. We are going to get into today's interview. It is a good one, and one that I was worried about from the beginning because it's something that I know nothing about. Lots of other aspects of photography, even though I'm not a newborn photographer or a family photographer, I know a good amount, right, about the subject. Obviously, I'm not an expert on everything, but today's guest is a real estate photographer, and real estate is something that I know nothing about because I've never had to do it in any sort of professional sense. I don't know what makes a real estate photo really good and compelling to make somebody want to buy a house. And today we're talking to a real estate photographer, Jordan Younce, and Jordan Younce is he's wonderful. He shares it all. He's great. He is also the host of the Road to Full-Time podcast, which I highly suggest you check out. He shares so many cool little stories and tips about photography, and I think that he shares the same mindset as I do, that sure, technicals are important and you need to know your camera settings, but a photo is more than just the sum of the settings that you use to take the shot. So highly recommend it. Check it out. without any further ado, we're just going to get on into this right now. Real estate photographer Jordan Younce. Today's guest is Jordan Younce, a real estate photographer and host of the Road to Full-Time podcast, where Jordan shares tips and strategies to learn how to put together a profitable photography business. Jordan, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Why don't you start off by telling us where you are from and what it is that you specialize in?
Well, I am from North Carolina. I live in North Carolina, central North Carolina, and I am right now, I guess, considered a real estate photographer full time. But I also do almost every other thing photography you can imagine. I try to, at least. So yeah, I do all the day-to-day stuff with full-time real estate photography, but I also do a lot of online training and have my own video podcast. I guess it's now a video podcast, but it's an audio podcast as well. Still working on a bunch of stuff. But yeah, I do all that full time, and it's just growing and growing each day. So it's becoming a lot more fun than I thought it was going to be.
Right. It always does. It always does, man. Well, so right now, primarily, your main source of income is through real estate photography instead of other aspects of photography?
It's kind of half and half right now. It's getting more half and half now. It started out where I work for an online website as their face of their website, making videos and stuff like that for their channel, make a podcast for their channel, make online training materials for their channels, stuff like that. So that's technically my real full-time job, I guess. So yeah, whenever photo jobs come up, that's usually the priority that day, is getting all that stuff taken care of. And then I can always work until like 3-4 in the morning to get other stuff taken care of.
No thanks.
But yeah, when real estate stuff comes up, I definitely hit that hard. That usually when that stuff comes up, that's all of that day. It doesn't technically have to be, but I really kind of concentrate on getting, spending time at the site, getting the photos perfect for the agent, talking with the agent, coming back, editing them all, invoicing, cataloging, all of that stuff. Yeah. So
okay.
So then other stuff comes after that.
Right. Of course. So one of the big reasons why I really wanted to talk to you today was that with the Beginner Photography podcast, a lot of the listeners are very passionate about their photography, whether it's weddings or landscapes or whatever it is. It's their sort of release. And when it comes to things like real estate photography, I've never met somebody who yep, my whole life I've always dreamt about being like a real estate photographer. It's something more kind of utilitarian. So I kind of want to figure out how you got into real estate photography.
Okay, that's a very difficult question. Brief history is when I first started in photography, I had no clue what I was doing. I didn't watch any YouTube videos at the beginning. I think I tell this on a couple other podcasts, but my main goal in getting a quote-unquote professional camera was to get the ability to blur out the background.
Right, yeah, of course.
That's all I wanted. That's all I cared about. So I saw those photos with the really bokeh background, and I was like, man, I think I just need a better camera to get that done. So I went through getting a Sony A200 a long, long time ago, and I put it in auto. That didn't do what I wanted it to do.
Never does.
Never does. And then I saw a guy on YouTube, and he was demoing a Canon T2i, and the only reason I got that camera after that other one was because I wanted it had video capability. And I was like, oh, cool, I can carry around a video camera and a stills camera at the same time. But again, I put it in auto, didn't do what I wanted it to do. So then I had to figure out what I wanted to do, how to get stuff done. And that's when I started looking at pretty much, I would assume almost all beginners, they go out and take landscape stuff.
Right. It's
that's
one
the
of the
easiest.
starts. Yeah.
Easiest subjects to take care of is to go out because it's easily accessible. And so that's what I started working out as. And I just took a bunch of landscape photos and I kind of made that my thing. But then I saw, God, what was the guy's name? I always forget this guy's name every time I get asked a similar question like this. How do I start real estate? I need to write it down. But
Just keep a post-it note on the
yeah.
computer.
But I saw a photo of his, and he took a picture of a lobby in a hotel. And I saw that, he had you could see the outside, basically the dynamic range was really, really good. You could see the outside, you could see the inside. He had the people walking through the lobby blurred, so you couldn't tell who they were. And it looks like he had some people staged as well, reading while other people were blurry. And I was like, that's a really cool image. I want to know how to get that. And this is me still not knowing how to do anything.
Right. Trying to tackle a pretty advanced topic right there. Yeah.
Because the guy had like 4 lights there. He had all these models there, and this is not something you can walk into like a Motel 8 and get. You gotta this is a job of his. And I was just like, how do I get that? How do I take care of that? How would I do something similar? And so I started researching, watching YouTube videos, and I realized that I started doing more. I started thinking about real estate more, architectural real estate more than landscape stuff. I still like landscape. That's a given. But I started wondering how to do that. And then I started getting into the aspects of like, I didn't know that going into a home, I mean, you could take photos for real estate agents. I knew that was a thing, but I was like, that seems like a pretty substantial thing. You always hear of like tons of wedding photographers. I mean, you're a wedding photographer. You hear tons of wedding photographers, portrait photographers. You hear them advertise all the time, but hardly ever do you hear a real estate photographer being advertised.
Of course, yeah.
That's not something you would see on the back of a car, even though it's on the back of my van right now. You would never.
So it's on one.
Yeah, it's on one in the state. So I was like, that could be a potential thing, because it's not something I just went in to try to make money. It was something that, I actually had a very good interest in. And that's kind of where it all snowballed from there, is just seeing one photo and wondering how the guy did that.
Wow. I went to film school, like I've said many times on the podcast, and one of my biggest inspirations, I guess, is Ron Howard. Like, as a director, the dude he's incredible, right? Apollo 13, like all these great movies. And
did you buy his masterclass?
No, I haven't, because I'm not into directing, so I don't.
No, I
don't do that anymore. But I have friends who have, and say that it's incredible. Like, it's truly a masterclass. But he has said many times that he gets his inspiration for an entire movie based off just one photo. That photography is like the most important aspect of his life, and then he turns a photo that he sees into something in his head that then turns into a movie. And that's great to hear that it's almost the same for you. You saw one photo, and you're like, wow, this is like an entirely new world that I've never explored before in my life. Now I want to look into it more, and now you have developed a career out of it, and that's super cool. So, is real estate photography for you more? Is there any sort of I'm not trying to put. Is there any sort of like passion that goes into it, or do you reserve like going out and vacation photos as passionate photography work? I just kind of want to see the mindset, because I've never been a real estate photographer. I've been asked to take, like, I took photos of my own home when we sold it, and it's a tough job, and like I don't want to do it, and I don't find any passion in it, but I'm trying to figure out if you do, or if there is, and if so, where does it come from?
Well, I got a scenario to kind of answer that question a little bit.
Awesome.
Recently, me and my family went on a beach vacation, and there was I think it's called a ship watch. It's just basically like a small deck inside of the house, just a couple stairs, and it's just a little platform. And so when I walked in there and saw the platform had huge windows all over the place, and you get a good view of the beach. And the first thing that went through my mind was like, I got to get a photo of that. I didn't want anybody to mess up the place, just to get that one photo. I ended up rearranging furniture. This is when people were out of the house. I would rearrange the furniture, set up the lamps the perfect way, stage it, and more time went into getting a photo of that than it did with any other photo during the beach trip at all.
Of course.
So So I mean, yeah, I went out and took some photos of the beach, and it was rainy one day and got some foggy looking photos. I had my drone, I flew it over the beach or the ocean and everything. But my favorite photo was the one taken over there, and I spent so many hours editing that photo. So when it comes to that's my passion, I would say so
Right,
on that
absolutely.
part at least.
Absolutely.
But there is something to be said going back to getting out and taking landscape photos every once in a while, because it's a totally different process. You know, the editing is totally different. The things you think about are totally different. So, you know, yeah, I love doing real estate photography. I'll do that every day, 4 or 5 times a day if I needed to. But every once in a while, if you see like a cool tree, I'll grab it, you know?
Yeah, no, of course, of course. It's just, I guess I just in my head think of my negative experience taking photos of my own personal house that I think, and yet I see these amazing photos of real estate photography. Like you said, the beautiful interiors, like perfectly straight lines, very wide. You can see inside the entire house, great lines. And I think like for me, even as a photographer, it's very difficult to get in there to just try and to get something that's worth a damn. You know what I mean? So
Well, on that topic, when I saw that you were a wedding photographer, what went through my mind was I am never going to shoot a wedding ever again. I shot 2 weddings, and I will never step foot inside of a church to photograph a bride and a groom again.
let me ask you one question: is there cake every day you show up to shoot a house?
No, but there
See,
should
there's
be.
cake every day at a wedding.
Yeah,
See, there you
yeah.
go. So there's pros and cons to everything, I suppose. So
But I'm
I
in and
totally
out of a house
understand.
in about 30, 45 minutes.
Okay, you win. You win. um, obviously, real estate photography, like we just talked about, it's not as easy as just walking into a house, snapping a few photos, and then collecting your check. So when you show up to a house, or a hotel, what have you, whatever it is that you're photographing, walk me through when you first show up to a new location. What is it that you're looking for, and how do you feature certain items, if that makes sense?
Uh, Basically, when I get to the home, usually the real estate agent is there because I like to meet them as well. So I'll meet with them, talk to them. The first thing I always ask them, besides the general questions, is there anything specific that you want to highlight with the home? Usually they say, you're the photographer, you go ahead and do what you need to do. But they might have something where one home in particular, they totally remodeled the inside, and they put a bunch of different shiplap stuff all over the place, and the floors are brand new, so they wanted to make sure to see enough of the floors and see some built-ins that they made and stuff like that. So I'll hear a little bit of that stuff. But most of the time, it's after I meet with them, I'll do a quick walk through the home just to make sure everything is straightened up, decent. I'll make sure all the lights are on. Without the camera, I'll do all of that, and then I'll go and start setting up my shots. I typically start as a general rule, just go all 4 corners of the rooms, get all of those, and then after I do that, I usually get that with the tripod to make sure it's all steady and nice. Then after I do that, if the home warrants it, because if it's like a 14,000 or 1,400 square foot home, that's a townhome, I'm not going to do all of this.
Of course.
But if it's a nicer home, then after hitting all the 4 corners, I'll again do a final walkthrough with the camera off the tripod, and get some different angles and different shots of stuff to highlight as well. Most of the time, I only get about I say maybe 3 or 4 or 5 off the tripod, because I really try to accomplish as much as just going around and getting all the 4 corners. But what really helps is it kind of goes along with the last thing, is the inspiration. I see I see a lot of different real estate stuff because I follow tons of stuff. So if I go into a living room and there's a killer photo that I saw on Instagram, if that living room is somewhat even remotely similar, I'll try to get that angle, that detail that they captured, and then I'll even try to get as close as they can as with the editing, to try to match that, because I love how that particular photo worked. Obviously,
Right.
It starts developing into my own style, But then that's kind of like the inspiration piece. If I see something, I want to try to emulate it just a little bit. Twofold. Number one, to see if I can actually do it, and number two is because I really really like how that looks, and I know the real estate agent is going to like that as well.
Right, right. That makes sense. So, what are some things that you would typically, that you would definitely want to feature? Say you walked into a house and you saw, I don't know, like, I'm totally trying to make this question more complicated than it needs to be. If you walk into a home, what is something that you see that you know that you have to feature this?
It's difficult because it depends on the home, obviously. But if it's like my perfect home,
Mm-hmm.
um, then obviously I want to make sure I get the kitchen. The kitchen, I want to, if the kitchen has any somewhat of granite countertops, I want to get that. I want to get the reflection of lights in the granite countertops because I like the way that looks. And that also shows like any pendant lights as well. Um, it really depends on the home. If they have built-ins or they have a nice fireplace area, then I'll probably get like 4 or 5 photos of that. I might get 4 or 5 photos of it, but the real estate agent might only use one.
Mm-hmm.
But I still want to get, you know, give a variety because sometimes it's not about within real estate, from what I've seen so far about what real estate agents want. They do want clear photos. They want nice photos. They want well lit photos. They don't want photos from an iPhone, obviously, because that's what they usually do.
That's what I was doing wrong. Okay, I got it. I got it.
Yeah. But they don't want they want that, but they also want something that just showcases the area simply. If I spend an hour editing one photo, it's probably going to be wasted because they won't pick that photo.
Oh man, that's so sad.
I know it's happened before. So that's kind of what I'll look for, is just small little details that maybe I've seen in other photos that are particular for this home, and then I'll try to highlight that as well. It really just depends on the home, though.
Yeah.
It's probably easier with exterior photos.
So when you typically show up to a house, do you have some sort of shot list? Or is there kind of like a common, like, oh, every room I got to get these few photos, every bedroom I got to get X photo, outside I got to get these photos? Or do you really just walk in and just let it all come to you?
Here lately, it's really been just walking in, because my process when I first started, because I only had 1 or 2 clients every couple months, because that's just how it starts, unless you know a lot of people and they want to hire you. Because mine was all cold. Like I had no leads, no nothing. It was just like, hey, I got a Google business listing. Let's see if somebody does this.
Wow.
So that's how it all started.
Mm-hmm.
And when my first guy called me and said, hey, do you want to photograph this home for me? He gave me the address. I immediately ran to the computer, looked up the address, looked up the Zillow listing of the home, looked up the details of, 3,400 square foot home,
Mm-hmm.
how many bedrooms, how many, so I could go in prepared saying, oh, okay, so this home is 5 bedrooms, 3 bath, all this stuff, bonus room, all this kind of stuff. I looked to see if they had any previous photos as well, to see if I could see what kind of I'm going into.
Mm-hmm.
They particularly didn't in that case, but that's kind of what I started doing. But now it's when, if they call and say, hey, we have a home, here's the address. Most of the time, unless I ask, I don't really even know the square footage until I get there, or the bedrooms or anything like that. I might know the area because I'll do a quick Google map search,
Right,
to see where it might be located and what's around it. But other than that, now it's basically just been, I know I'm probably going to jinx myself, it's been fairly easy going in there and just kind of chatting with the agent for a couple minutes and, learning all that. The only time I might want to know like the square footage is if they ask how much it's going to cost.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's when I have, almost every real estate agent has a little chart on their website saying if it's this square footage, it's going to cost this much, this, and this.
As far as the photos go, or?
Yeah, because they'll base it on square footage of the home. But some people do it differently. When I first started, I would say, depending on the home, it's going to cost between this much. Mm-hmm. So let's say it's going to cost between $100 and $300. that's very vague, and a lot of people don't like that.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell them the cost right offhand, but they kind of want to know going into it before they even call me sometimes, just most like everybody else. So I just started putting a small chart on my website so they could see that. But I've seen other agents, for example, say that the reason they hired me is because they said that, yeah, the other photographer might charge per square footage, but they only give you 30 photos, or they only give you 20 photos or something like that. And this particular real estate agent said, what if I want more of those? Or what if I want different angles of something? And she said the photographer actually said, my photos are perfect. You don't need more than 20.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
So,
I haven't heard that one before, but okay.
Yeah. That's not my tagline.
I can't imagine that would be anybody's tagline, but you got to be pretty full of yourself to say something like that.
Well, apparently he was really full of himself. So that's why she hired me, because I said I know for listings you can only have, in this area at least for this MLS, you can only have 30 photos. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I'll give 60 depending on the home. If the home's huge, I'll give 60 or whatever. You don't get me for the number of photos. You get me for my time. So that's what a lot of people tend to like as far as that goes.
Cool.
That might have been a ramble off to a different subject, but I have no idea.
No, that was fine. That definitely answered questions for sure. So why don't you take me back when you said that you just had your Google listing and you got the call for that one house? Was that your first paid real estate gig right there?
Yes.
So can you talk me through how it works with real estate photography, finding clients? Because it's more than just the homeowners. Like you said, it's the real estate agents. And you talked a little bit about how payment works in terms of square footage, but is there anything else that maybe you wish that you would have known when you first got started about real estate payment and finding new gigs?
Well, to answer the first one, when it comes to getting that first,
ask a lot of questions all at the same time. I'm so sorry.
Hey, that's fine. That's fine. It's a challenge game. I have to remember them. So for the first one, yeah, that Google listing was my first gig. That was how they found me. It was a weird, strange gig, and the guy ended up, he was a returning customer, but he said he found me on the Google listing, and it seemed like after that a switch just flipped, because I've to this day, I mean, the most I've ever tried to reach out to clients is sending out, going and grabbing a one of those real estate magazines you see at the shopping centers when you walk out the door. Yeah, I'll grab one of those and I'll just run through the emails, because they're all listed there. Run through the emails of all the agents in the thing and send just a copy and paste email saying, hey, here's my services. Here's, everybody gets those spam emails.
Of course.
So I would say that's the most I've ever done. I've really never done much else for that. Thankfully, so far, all of it's been through word of mouth. Mm-hmm. So, this guy heard of me. He gave my information to this guy, and it just kind of snowballed from there.
That's awesome.
But it really was a switch flipped. Like once that first call came in, it seemed like I just had more and more and more and more and more, and I didn't have to do anything. So it's good to have other people doing your marketing for you.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I wish that my wedding photography would take off like that. That would be wonderful.
You got to go to shows and all this kind of stuff, don't you?
I've been to one and I hated it, and I'm not going back. So now I resort to a lot of referrals, trying to treat my clients as best as possible, so that, like you said, hopefully they can pass my name on to friends or whatever, and then lots of Facebook ads. It's very expensive.
Man, I've only ran one Facebook ad, and it's probably a waste of $35, I think.
Was it for real estate agents?
Yes, I targeted it for real estate agents in a five city range.
Oh, okay.
Honestly, it probably wasn't the right post, because it was a commercial photography post that I did for a dentist office, and I probably shouldn't have used that as my starting post, but it was like my first one that I wanted to test out.
Right. Well, like you said, now you kind of have your name going around town, so it's definitely picking up. So maybe you don't have to worry about it so much.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't mind starting to do more just to get more people, but right now it's working out fairly well. Not right now because the snow is here, but
Yeah, yeah, we talked about that earlier. The snow can be. Has there ever been like a real estate agent who asks for pictures in the snow? You know, if there's like a I don't know, old craftsman. No, it's always like no.
I don't think they want to go out in it as much as I don't want to go out.
Okay.
So
makes
yeah,
sense.
so for that first job, it was really just like a light switch flipped, and that's when it was almost like Google was like holding back my stuff and was like, we're not going to let anybody see it. And then as soon as they were like, okay, go, everybody started, contacting me about jobs.
That's so sinister of Google. I can't believe that.
I swear they did it. So yeah, that was my first real thing, and that was kind of fun. And from then it was, even people that are for sale by owners, they'll type in, Greensboro real estate photographer or whatever, and I'm one of the first listings that comes up. I guess it depends on where you're Googling it from, but mine is probably like the second Google business listing that pops up, while there's another guy that's been doing it for years and years and years. His pops up first, but we also flip flop, so it's like a mini competition between us.
Right.
But yeah, I've seen people kind of come to me more and more lately, so that's really nice. And I think it's all, tell you the truth, if I could give one tip, it would be create a Google business listing right now and just let it sit, update it with photos and all that kind of stuff.
Let's real quick. Let's take a step back even before that. Let's say somebody likes the idea of real estate photography. They're nowhere near ready to potentially try to make a go at this for any sort of income. What advice would you have for them? Because obviously starting a business Google listing before you have anything to show might not be the best advice. But for somebody just getting started, what sorts of tips do you have for them? Should they be shooting around their house? Should they be reaching out to other people? What should they do?
I would nowadays it's a little bit easier because I wasn't even thinking about this when I first started. But yeah, I would definitely shoot your home. Stage it like you would want a real photo to be. Definitely shoot your home. Ask if you have a friend that has a nice home too. Say, hey, do you mind if I come in and take some photos real quick? And just build up your portfolio that way. I mean, it's much like a portrait photographer. If they're going to go out and do portraits, you want to kind of get your feet wet a little bit. So you might ask friends to pose for you and your neighbors, hey, can I take photos of your kids or something like that? It's the same way. It's just a little harder to find a home that you could take a photo of.
A whole home.
Yeah, I need a whole home to have. But one thing I'm actually going to start, which might actually help for more beginners, is Airbnb.
That's genius. Yeah.
You actually rent an Airbnb for a day. And if it's a nice Airbnb, you have the whole place to yourself and you're in and out in a day, and it might cost you about $150 or $100 or something like that, but you're in and out.
Yeah. And then to build your portfolio for, relatively cheap. If you don't, I understand as somebody who started off just asking my friends to take photos of them, it's a whole lot easier to get one person to do their hair and put on a nice shirt and then take their photo rather than like, well, you got to do the laundry, you got to do all the dishes in your sink, you got to clean up the kids' room and all this stuff.
Right.
But the Airbnb, that's a great tip right there. That is a great tip.
There's another one that I'm actually going to when it gets spring, I'll probably contact more. But also if you want to shoot smaller areas, smaller homes, it's technically not a home, it's an apartment. But apartments in your area typically have guest suites. And so these are just suites that they rent out for guests coming to the area for like $60 or $75 a day.
Really?
Yeah, you have to. Not all of them offer them, but a lot of them actually do. And so there's a couple. I know there's probably about 4 guest suites that are, and they're really decorated somewhat nice. At least in my area, they're actually decorated really nice. And you could actually get your feet wet in that as well, and say, hey, I just want to rent this out for a day, and then grab all your shots. You don't have to stay there the whole day if you don't want to, but grab all your shots. You can actually take your time, set up lighting if you wanted to. So I'm going to start doing that because I want to build up my portfolio even more, even if it's me paying to actually have a job done.
Right.
Just to keep getting a bunch of fresh images out there that I can keyword with. Now I can shoot apartments, even though I have that now on anyway, but you can keep keywording all these images. So that's another quick thing. That's another easy way of getting different portfolio images.
That kind of brings up an interesting question that I hadn't thought about before, but I guess it makes sense. When it comes to real estate photography, are there different genres of real estate photographers, like photographers who only shoot apartments and photographers who only shoot hotels like you talked about? Or is it pretty much when it comes to lines, you can kind of do whatever?
If I could rename a genre of photography, I wouldn't call it real estate photography. I would call it like inside photography. I don't know, like I'd call it indoor photography. I don't know what I would call it. But
Pretty vague. I don't know if that's going to stick.
well, I mean, because maybe it's just architectural photography. Maybe that's what it should be.
Okay, there you go.
Because if somebody contacts me about you know a home one day and, like I said, a dentist office the next day, I'm going to take those photos.
Of course.
It's all indoors. I mean, it's the same thing. You just got to highlight certain things. So, if the dentist office wants a lobby that's shown real nice, then
you're going to be able to do it.
It's the same thing as having a living room. You just got to, once you do a couple jobs, you might be nervous about doing something different that you've never done before. But once you get, I found at least once you get in there, you start like, oh, this is just like any other kitchen or living room or whatever. The lighting is all the same. It's all gross lights, gross warm lights. So you got to fix that, but it's all pretty much the same.
Okay, no, that makes sense. When it comes to real estate photography, there is some much more specialized equipment than there is in like traditional portrait or wedding photography. Can you talk to me about what sorts of equipment that you use that maybe others don't, and why you use it?
Okay, so for my body, real quick, it's a Canon 6D, so it's the entry level full frame camera, and I could have done this with my old T2i. I just would need a different lens for it, but you kind of have, as far as image quality, you kind of get a pass in a way, because
it's going to be downscaled so much.
It's going to be downscaled so much. I give, like, if I take a photo, for example, if I take a photo with my camera right now, it looks immaculate on my screen.
Of course.
Upload it to Zillow, MLS, any kind of thing, it looks like a muddy mess.
Yeah.
No matter how many times I try to compress it and give it to them in a certain format or whatever. I mean, they're all 72 DPI images or whatever, PPI images. They're all 72 now. So they load real fast, but they're kind of pixelated or whatever. The agents know that. So,
of course, yeah.
In a way, you get a pass. You still can't have it like blurry and weird, and you still can't be a cell phone image. But you kind of get a pass when it comes to that. Obviously, you need a wide angle lens. The people say the wider the better, but I feel like there's a sweet spot when it comes to full frame cameras between 15 and 17 millimeters. That's kind of the sweet spot, because once you start going into like the 14 millimeters, the curves of the lines get so bad that even Lightroom and manually adjusting them can't correct that. It can correct it, however, everything else starts to look really gross. The couch starts to look like 15-foot couch. So you got to have a decent wide angle lens for that one. And flash, I sometimes use flash. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I just use HDR real quick, just do a bracketed sequence and put it all together. But sometimes I use flash to highlight certain things. For those who want to see what the power of flash can do for your real estate photography, there's a photographer called Mike Kelly. If anybody's ever heard of him, if you haven't heard of him, check him out, because he does a really advanced technique when it comes to flash. He's just one of them, but I really like his work. So his can show you the power of flash.
I'll be sure to link to him in the show notes. Mike Kelly. Is there any the specific tutorial or video or book?
No, you can check his YouTube channel. I think he put a couple of things up there showing a little behind the scenes of what he does. But obviously, for anybody starting out, you're not going to do what he does.
Right? Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But if you want to see what it can evolve into, that's a definite thing to check out. And that's the kind of stuff that gets you inspired real quick and just like, oh, I got to know how to do that. So yeah, I'll use flash sometimes. It will never be an on-camera, number one, because mine doesn't have an on-camera flash, but it has the pop-up flash always bounced with a pop card. And if that ever happens, I don't ever do remote flash on a stick because the time being at the home, it would be wasted.
Right.
If I got commissioned to do like a hotel or something, yeah, all day long, I would do remote flashing all day long. But that kind of stuff and just a standard sturdy tripod, that's basically all you need to get into real estate photography starting out. And that's why it was so easy to transition from landscape photography to something like that, because the equipment is essentially the same. Just the thought process is different.
So when I'm thinking back, and I don't remember how long ago this was, who made the video or what, but it was essentially talking about the importance of a tilt shift lens in real estate photography. So for those listening, a tilt shift lens can change the perspective of a photo so that you can get straighter lines, specifically through the lens. It's kind of hard to describe without seeing a photo
really
of its
difficult to describe.
examples. So if you're listening and you really want to know more about a tilt shift lens, just Google it and you'll find some examples. But I'm wondering how important it is today with how advanced Lightroom's lens corrections are. I'm assuming that you don't have a tilt shift, or that you don't use a tilt shift.
No, I can't warrant paying that much money for a tilt shift right now.
Specialized lens, right?
Yeah. For example, Mike Kelly, who I just talked about, he uses tilt shift lenses.
Okay.
So he actually shows, there's one video, I don't remember what it is, but he actually shows him changing the perspective, dialing in the dials to change the perspective to get everything perfectly straight.
It's crazy.
In camera. He still shows you how to change it in post, or correct it in post. But yeah, with Lightroom these days, there's only been a couple occasions where it was probably my fault, because with the wide angle lens, you can't be angled down too much, and you can't be angled up too much, and you can be perfectly level with it, but then your tripod can't be up too high and your tripod can't be down too low. So you got to get that little sweet spot.
Like Goldilocks thing going on.
Yeah, you have to get that, because it's gonna look weird. And even if you change, if you auto transform it or something like that in Lightroom, even if you do that, it still might look a little off.
Of course.
So there's still that sweet spot. I actually have a mark on my tripod where that's where it needs to be every time.
Oh, really? That's smart.
Yeah. So I mark it there because I change my tripod height a lot. So I have a mark on there to know where exactly the camera's supposed to go. But yeah, it's not going to kill your photos if you don't have a tilt shift lens.
Right.
It's not going to do that.
Again, I guess I was just trying to figure out, like, obviously, like, some of the equipment that's used by a professional versus what you can kind of use to get into real estate. What you can get into real estate photography. So essentially, the basics: you got to have a good tripod, nice sturdy tripod. You got to have a nice wide lens. So if you're on a crop, I'm assuming like a 10 to
20.
Yeah, 10 to 20 millimeter lens. And then if you're on full frame, Canon's got that beautiful 16 to 35, and that's what I'm assuming you use. You're using the 17 to 40?
I use 17 to 40. I want the 16. That 1 millimeter is going to make a big difference.
Really?
Yes. I want that 16 to 35 so bad.
I want you to talk to me a little bit about the Road to Full-Time podcast. Tell me about what it is that you're doing, and like what sorts of resources that you're putting out, because I've listened to it and I really like it. In fact, I just recently, again, more questions all at once. I recently listened to your episode with your Instagram success story. Like you said, going to a store, buying, or just picking up one of those magazines, posting on Instagram, and now getting a big gig, which is awesome for you. And you share lots of little bits of information like that on the podcast. So tell the listeners a little bit more about what it is and what the podcast does.
Okay. Real quick, though, I'm going to give an exclusive on this particular podcast.
Oh, my gosh. I got to get ready for this. This is huge.
So you mentioned that Instagram story real quick. I'll go into a little bit of that in just a second, but for those who haven't heard it, I'll give an exclusive update on the story from that, because I haven't given an update on the story yet.
Sweet.
So Road to Full-Time, it started out with being do you mind if I talk about my previous site that transformed into? Okay. So the full background was I had a site called Picture Monk, and so that site was basically just almost every other photography tip website out there. I would basically just talk about every kind of photography tip or anything that I could come up with. A lot of people do that. Fro knows photo. He does all that stuff. Everything like that. So I thought, hey, that's the way I need to go. So I did that for probably 3 years, just putting out content, podcasts, videos, what have you. And I started a series when I started working from home full time, quitting my day job and coming home full time. I started a series called The Road to Full Time because I wanted it to be, even if I was quote unquote technically full time, I wanted to continue that and show how to keep building the business to hopefully stay full time. So I wanted, yeah, that's a big thing. You can have 5 jobs in a week, but then after that you got nothing. So I wanted to start a video series where basically if an agent called me or if anybody called me about a job, I would kind of do a vlog series about my journey that day. And that video series was probably the most popular content that I ever produced in 3 years for my site. And so I kept doing them. I haven't done them lately because I've been trying to do way too many things. I need to calm that down.
I understand, man. Preaching to the choir right here.
But I got a pretty good amount of videos that show kind of the behind the scenes of me going to a job, first person view of the camera of what I'm shooting, and then some small detailed stuff of me editing the photos and delivering them and stuff like that. So it's basically just a video blog through that day of shooting. And there's some personal stuff thrown in there. It's just a vlog, what you would typically see, but it's all centered around photography. So that was by far, everybody loved that. Everybody was like, hey, can we see more videos like that? So I started concentrating on the full-time stuff more, the business aspect of photography more than the, how do I shoot a landscape photo with a certain camera, because that just wasn't interesting to me anymore. So I came to the realization that I need to quit the Picture Monk thing because I was just basically throwing into a gigantic pool that everybody else was throwing into, and concentrate on one specific aspect, and that's the business part of photography. So I changed everything over. It's now all Road to Full Time, and it's basically just a site just detailing certain things about the business aspect of it. So there's some articles on there about what's wasting your time. Like if you're constantly designing your website to make it look super pretty, no one cares about that much. Right. It's all about getting your name out there and everything like that. So it's stuff geared just towards the business aspect of photography, and that's what interests me now, because if I can grow my business, then I can help other people grow their business, and they can see how just small little things can help grow their business over time. You're not going to do anything unless you go viral. There's not really one thing you're going to do that's going to get you 100 clients in 5 days. Yeah. It's like what everybody says. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
For sure. Well, like I said, I've listened to quite a few episodes, and even back, because on iTunes it still shows the older
Picture
episode,
Monks.
Yeah, with Picture Monk. And I've listened to a bunch of episodes, and I really enjoy what it is that you're doing, and I think that you're sharing a lot of good, actionable stories, like real world stories of your life and what's happening, and it makes sense. It can be applied. I feel like when I listen to it, even though your story was about a real estate gig that you booked, it was for drone work, right? I still think about well, how can I apply that to my life? I know there's lots of bridal magazines. What if I reached out to more planners? So it's not just for real estate photography, which I appreciate for sure. So now I want to get into that update. What's going on with that drone gig?
Well, so what? I'll do a quick synopsis on what happened. So real quick, I mentioned that I grabbed one of those real estate magazines at the store earlier in the show. So I did the same thing, but I got a magazine, and I was going to flip through there and see where where agents might have had bad photos that looked terrible. And I was going to contact them and say, hey, I can run out and grab some photos for your house if you need to for your listing. But just sitting right here at my desk, I had the magazine on my desk and I was like, hey, I got my coffee in the morning. Let me just take a little Instagram photo of my coffee cup next to my magazine. So I took the photo. I tagged the company that has the magazine on Instagram and did a whole bunch of hashtags and all that kind of stuff. About a week later, they said, hey, would you mind if we repost this, love this, or whatever? And I said, oh, yeah, obviously. So I was like, cool, I actually see a result of something that I'm doing. And then a couple weeks later, a week later after that, the guy actually, the owner of the magazine, plus he owns like 3 other magazines that I found out, all real estate stuff. He called me in and say, hey, we're getting this new Inspire 2 drone to do video work of all the neighborhoods in the areas, and do all of this work, and we need somebody to operate the camera part of it while the other guy, the pilot, flies the drone. So I was like, yes. So so I went in and I had a meeting with him. I talked to him for a while, and basically I'm going to be a part of their team part-time. So I still get to do what I'm doing. It's just going to be a lot more work on my end, but I still get to do what I'm doing with my online training stuff, with my real estate stuff, with the Road to Full Time, and this. I get to do more stuff, and that's what's fun. Obviously, it helps the bottom line as well. But the update to that story was after I met with them, I didn't hear from them for about a week because they still need time to get the drone in and all that kind of stuff. They said it cost like $10,000.
Oh my god.
Yeah, I know.
Wow.
Mine cost $800, and I thought that was ridiculous.
Mine was $5. I thought, whoa, I don't even know how much I'm going to fly this thing.
But yeah, they're getting that in, and he contacted me. He contacted me yesterday, actually, and he said he was asking me a lot about not about my real estate stuff, but about my online training, because I told him I do a lot of that full time. And he said, his exact question was, are you a partner in that website? And I said, I mean, no, I'm not technically a partner. And he said, well, if this whole thing works out for us, if this work that you're doing works out for us, is there ever a point when you would see coming to work for us full time and doing drone work, video work, photo work? And my first thought was, thanks, but no thanks. Because I don't want to go back to it being a full-time job, even though it's doing what I'm doing.
Right. You have more time flexibility.
Yeah. So I don't want to go back to that, but it is great knowing that I possibly have a fallback if something drastically happens.
Yeah. Wow. That is a huge update.
I think that's a cool thing. Out of all I did was just post one photo on Instagram and tag them. That's all I did. Yeah. That's all I did. It's not like I took a Coke can and tagged Coke and said, hey, I can photograph your Cokes for you. Sure. It's like it's a small market, but a lot of those small markets can really, really add up to being a bigger gig.
Oh, that's so awesome. And like I said, you share a lot of stories like that on the Road to Full Time podcast. So highly recommend that everybody check it out for sure. Jordan, why don't you tell everybody else where they can, aside from the Road to Full Time podcast, do you want anybody to check you out anywhere else online?
Yeah, you can, if you want to see my real estate stuff, my portfolio, my business website, you could see that at photographynorthcarolina.com. So that's my business portfolio site. roadtofulltime.com, that's the Road to Full Time stuff. And just subscribe to the podcast if you want to hear some audio details. All of the stuff is posted online. So even if you don't want to subscribe to the podcast, I'm fine with that. You can see all of it at Road to Full Time anyway. But that's pretty much the places to find me. Road to Full Time on Instagram as well. And you can also find my personal stuff if you want to. I'm not a terrible looking guy. On my full name, Jordan Younce, on Instagram.
Awesome. Well, Jordan, again, I know that we went on way too long, way longer
That's
than
fine.
I told you we would.
We can go for 3 more hours if you want to.
We'll have to set that up at a later time for sure. I really enjoyed our podcast, and I know that a lot of the listeners got a ton of value out of this. So, again, Jordan, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for inviting me.
So, when are you going to go around and start taking photos of your own house to practice real estate photography? I know I should really do that. We are thinking about putting our house on the market because we're just not happy here. I know if you're listening and you've been a listener for a while, you're probably thinking like, didn't you just move in like 7 months ago or something like that? And yeah, we did. We sure did. But the neighborhood just isn't what it doesn't matter. If we're going to sell the house, selling real estate photos is going to be super important. So I should definitely get on that and give it a try with some of these awesome tips that Jordan shared in this podcast. I'm also interested if anybody is thinking about getting into real estate photography. I really want to know your thoughts on the podcast. I have enjoyed it. Invited Jordan. I tried to merge those two words. I invited Jordan into the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group. So if you have any follow-up questions, he is the man to ask. He knows his stuff about real estate photography, and I bet he would be willing to answer those questions if you were in the group. So if you want to join, head over to facebook.com/Beginner Photography Podcast. Click the link on the side and join the group. Ask your questions today. That is all that I got for today. So until next week, I want you to get out there. I want you to be shooting all that you can. I want you to be having fun. If you're somewhere where it's cold and snowy, get out there, try something new. You never know. The snow is completely different when you're out there actually in it, taking photos of it rather than just looking at it through a car window. So try something new, If it's beautiful and sunny, like my mom in Arizona, who she said that it was like 78 degrees today, and I'm super jealous. If you live somewhere like that, then you should have no excuse as to why you're not outside shooting right now, because it's beautiful. So until next week, I will see you guys then. Get out there, keep shooting, stay safe. I love you all, and I will see you later.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Beginner Photography Podcast. Be sure to join the conversations on Facebook and Instagram. And if you want any links or resources we talked about in today's episode, check out the show notes at beginnerphotographypodcast.com. See you again next week.